Welcome, John. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Great to be here, Nathan. It's going very well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Plenty of snow up in Utah this time of year.
Yeah, it's been a mild winter, but the mountains have some snow. So if I could only find some time to get out and ski, I'd go. So,
There's some great resorts there. That's for sure. I was over in Colorado a couple of years ago. Very, very jealous of your location. But no, welcome to the podcast. You've got a really, really interesting background. Obviously, John's the current CMO of ex-IoT security vendor Phosphorus Security. Give us a bit of an intro, John, in terms of your background over the last 20 plus years, and I guess how you've got to where you are today.
yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I've had kind of an interesting journey. I think, I'm kind of a combination of being at a lot of the big guys, helping them kind of, like I like to say in marketing, find their soul, and then turn that into a strategy and a vision. Um, I kind of got into cyber from the tech side. I mean, I was with Motorola actually running there as a product line manager. And at Motorola, you not only have to run the product line, but you have to do all the product marketing too. So it was kind of a combination, but I was running their wireless LAN business and brought the first wireless switch to market. And within that, we kind of had to incorporate security into that switch, which kind of got me thinking about the security sector. So I decided to, I had kind of a fork in the road. Do I take a different path or do I go to the security? I decided I like that market. I think it's one I could live in and be interesting and dynamic. So I ended up at McAfee for my first venture into security. At the time, they were called Network Associates, which thankfully a host of us pushed to rename to McAfee, which was their consumer business, which had the better name. Um, and so spent several years at McAfee, went through multiple administrations. The last administration was the best. That was when Dave DeWalt came in. You might know Dave DeWalt. Um, Went on to, be CEO at FireEye and a host of other companies and now has Night Dragon. George Kurtz was there. Stuart McClure was there. A whole, group of very dynamic leaders, and all of us worked closely together. Really, turned McAfee into a full, security company. One that was, kind of focused on the endpoint, but then grew to be the network side and the data and the website and, vulnerability management and all of those things. So that was a fantastic kind of experience. And from there, I started to dabble in the startup side, kind of wanted to build some startups. So it was a combination of kind of startups and going back to some of the big guys. The spent some time at Symantec, which was surreal. I'm one of our biggest competitors. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in there working for them, which was kind of a surreal experience. Checkpoint and then back to startups. Had what brought me from the Bay Area to Utah was Solera Networks. Solera was ultimately bought by Greg Clark and Blue Coat Systems at the time, and then went into Blue Coat, and kind of from there just kept building early stage startups. So it's a I like to think of myself as kind of an interesting background. I've been at the big guys, but I also have done a lot of, you know, startups, early stage startups, building those brands, building go to market, building revenues, um, a host of those things. So that's kind of in a nutshell, that my
Awesome.
25 years in this dynamic, crazy industry of cybersecurity. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Talk to me a bit more about the 5 years at McAfee, because obviously you mentioned some big names there. Obviously, George, who's now the CEO of CrowdStrike, and Dave as well. What was it like in the early days, and what was it like actually scaling that thing out?
I mean, it was very interesting. I mean, you remember when I came in to help build the network security side. So, network associates at the time, and it's weird to even hear that term. I used to say when I was at McAfee, network associates sounds like a skin rash, not a good enterprise security company. It's a terrible name. Um, but first thing we had to do was really build out that kind of network security side. They were dabbling a little bit in web security, but really, it was so focused on the endpoint, naturally, right? And kind of that endpoint security. So really worked. McAfee had just acquired introvert networks, which brought in this product called IntraShield, which brought them into the at the time the intrusion prevention space, which was this very exploding kind of cool space. It started with intrusion detection, and then went to intrusion prevention. And so that was really where we were able to kind of establish McAfee as a leader in a really big network security side. From there, it was interesting. George Kurtz came in through the acquisition of Foundstone, which was, a vulnerability management play, right? That brought George and Stuart into McAfee and a host of others, which then started to, increase the aperture on things like vulnerability management. We bought a lot of other acquisitions in the web security side. And then we started to forge the DLP side, which was interesting. McAfee wasn't really known for DLP. It was kind of exploding one. We had our eyes on a product, but a host of us decided to start positioning ourselves almost a year in advance that we were a DLP player. So by the time we got the product, we were known as a leader in DLP. Which is one of the things you kind of want to do in this sector sometimes is pre-position yourself, right? Um, so that was very interesting, but it was really, then we changed the name to McAfee, which was a big, big thing. There was an effort inside to really go to that name. That really was us finding our soul at McAfee and saying, look, we're one brand. This is security. This is us. We're going to go, we're the leader. And from there it went. McAfee was kind of a very passive player for a while. I mean, I like to say that the likes of Symantec beat us up more than we beat them up and some of the others. But when a host of us are in there, I'm a predator in this industry. You have to be, ruthlessly competitive in security. As you know, there's so many vendors. It's so crowded. So when, George and then Dave came in, we really turned McAfee into an incredibly aggressive, like, leader. I mean, we had a fire in us. We went out, we acquired, we grew. And it was really a great time. I worked very closely with Dave at the time. And, um, you know, I don't have to say those guys are competitors, right? Right. And I think a lot of when you look back, there's a lot of that McAfee culture that is into the crowd strikes and what Dave was able to do and a host of others that were in McAfee at the time. So it was a great kind of experience in a big company and helping be on the one of the teams that really grew them out to a leading security brand right at the time they were being acquired by Intel as the time I exited, and then went on from there to just continue to harvest my skills and just go build startups. So,
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. How was the transition then from going from McAfee into some of these startups that you've grown? Obviously, some of them being extremely small startups with pretty much no footprint. What's the transition like working for established companies who may have the product marketing and the demand gen already in place to actually building that from scratch? How is the transition? Which one do you prefer, or do you like both?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, clearly I've done a lot of startups, so I'm passionate about building companies and brands, right? Um, so, I love to do that. Like I say, though, at the big companies, never forget they also need to be built. And sometimes they need to be rebuilt. They need to kind of get back to finding their soul and what their primary vision is. And so whether I'm in a big company or a small one, I'm building, right? But it's not, it can be a tough transition, right? I mean, so you really need, I think, to become a full stack CMO, and I, consider myself a full stack CMO in the sense that I come from the product, the technology side. And from there, you acquire all the other domains and skill sets that pile on top so that you're a full stack, right? So you can write every word of everything around the company and its products and its positioning and messaging, but you're also driving all the other functions, right? You're also driving the enablement side and the channel side and the demand gen side and the digital marketing, right? And all of those other critical things. So you have to kind of acquire those, and that can be a tough transition. You need to be, like I always say, it's risk. You need to be comfortable with stepping out into that and taking that risk. You're going to fail, you're going to fall. You need to pick up yourself up quickly, fail fast, and learn from that and move on. So those transitions can be tough, the initial ones. But once you start to do that, um, when you kind of get that rush of just building that and what it's like to, build something that becomes, a big competitor, known in their space, it becomes something you kind of want to keep doing again.
Awesome. Really interesting. You touched on earlier, obviously, the security market is so competitive now. I mean, I think there's about 4,000 vendors across, obviously, more startups, and the large vendors too. How do you actually differentiate your brand in a super crowded market as a CMO? What are some of the strategies that you actually use to make sure that your product actually does stand out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, that is really the $60,000 question of, I mean, anything. And even when you're at a big company, you need to kind of do that. Although I love being at the underdog, right? And having the big guys kind of be presumptuous that they don't have someone nibbling at their heels that's a threat to them, right? So you can take advantage of that. But look, it's ruthlessly competitive. I often tell people that aren't in cyber and don't get it that, think about other big industries, automotive, maybe, the hotel industries, that just pick them, right? And in most cases, those industries come down to three to four to maybe five vendors that make up the entire space, right? You turn to cyber and it's thousands, right? So it's unlike many other industries, which is why I love it, right? But I think, look, at the end of the day, you need to do several things, right? So, and sometimes you're there early enough where you need to build the brand, right? You need to understand the market and set the strategy and the vision, right? And you need to begin to help make a connection and communicate what your value is in that space, right? You have to cut through, and it's not about feeds and speeds and 10, laundry list of features. That's not it. You have to kind of understand what is the value you're providing to your ICP, right? Or your ideal customer, that persona, that profile. What's that value? You need to build a company and a message, and you need to communicate that value with passion, right? So I often say luckily I'm naturally a very passionate person. You need to have passion in this space. If you're building a brand, you need to build it. And I often say everything needs to be what I call above the line, right? That just means you can't be under the line. You're done. Even at the line isn't adequate enough. If you're just at the line in your brand and your passion and your value and your message and your strategy, you're not quite going to cut it. The big guys are going to take you. You need to be above the
Mhm.
line in everything you do. And I often say, when you build a brand and you make a connection with someone through passion and communicating value that really connects and values to them, right? You get one shot to do that oftentimes. Someone who's going to experience your brand for the first time, you better hit it out of the park because you likely will not get another chance, right?
Mhm.
It's so precious. So, insisting that the company, everyone, whether it's them interacting with people in the company, the website of the company, some content of the company, the social profile of the company, whatever it might be, that experience by that target persona and customer needs to be above the line and hit it out of the park so that they
Mhm.
experience that, right? So many times it comes down to articulating that value, and it's 3 points, not six, right?
Yeah.
It's It's clear. It's done with passion and in a way that somehow makes some connection to those who you're trying to communicate to and reach, right? And those are kind of the simple things that you have to do to build that brand. Try to rise above the noise as best you can. And then from there, it's, all the other things, right? It's executing your plan and how are you going to go fill the pipeline, right? What are the channels you're going to use to go, get those at bats and make those connections with the people you're trying to talk to, right? And so that brings in a host of all the full stack things, right? How are you going to go do that? It comes from things like I'm one that steps out. I'm often the face of the company. I'm out speaking, talking about the market. I'm the one when I do that, what am I trying to do? Make a connection, be passionate, and have some connection where they say, huh, that's very interesting. Maybe I want to learn more, or I want to understand, or you've made me feel like you understand my world and my pain a little bit. So therefore, I want to understand what you do to help me with that, right? So those are ways that you're going to use that kind of connection and the passion and the value you're providing to kind of communicate and get that to that person. So those are some of the things you need to do. And if you're at an early startup and you're competing with big guys, that can be huge. Yeah, it's intimidating. It's tough, right? But
Absolutely.
that's the exciting part, right? Because often I love to be dismissed. I love to be brushed aside. I love to be, written off or just dismissed as no one who's going to be a threat. I love that position.
The underdog. Yeah.
And now you have a chance to just, I just go right around and just go hit it. Those are some of the things that, can help you be successful at even big companies, but certainly the startup side, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. You touched before on having to be above the line to even compete with some of the larger vendors who may take up a larger chunk of the market share. How do how do you actually make noise in a marketing sense with a much smaller marketing budget compared to some of the larger players? What are some of the ways you can actually, get a bit of traction and make a bit of noise with a much smaller budget?
Yeah. And that's a key point. That's another great question. And that's part of the challenge, right? When you're at a startup, when you're at a big company, I mean, my gosh, you've got budgets every quarter. Sometimes you're not even spending those budgets, which means at the end of the quarter, there's a rush to quick spend your budget, right? So lots of money, tons of people, plenty of resources. Then you move to the startup side. You're oftentimes, a one, two, three, four-person show. You need to be completely, you know, um, the one who's rolling up your sleeves to go do stuff yourself, right? You've got a very small budget. Maybe that budget can grow over time, but it's very small and finite, and you have to absolutely make the best of that budget, right? So I think that side is really kind of understanding what are your strategies? Where do you need to put those dollars to make a difference, right? There are some things you have to do. So you need your infrastructure, right? You need all the marketing operations infrastructure that even makes your engine run. That's kind of like you have to do that, right? I oversee the analyst side. You're investing in analysts. So there are some costs and budget items that are just you have to do it, right? Then there are pieces where, look, you need to strategically do that, right? You have to get creative, right? I mean, so again, you need to go out and talk. If you're not making those connections with where you think your ICP is, where your buyer is, and remember, it's not going where you want your buyers to be. It's going where they actually are. And that's a subtle difference. A lot of times we want them to be at a big trade show. We want them to be at this place. But today, oftentimes that's not the case. So trying to understand where your target buyer and ICP is, and then trying to figure out how to get there is important, right? So for me, I'm out speaking all the time. That's a big way that I help kind of make connections, build the brand, build awareness. articulate vision and help actually not educate people on our product, educate people on the problem and the complexities and the issues with that, right? Some of the implications of what's happening in the market that you help with. So when I talk, I don't talk product at all. I talk the problem and the space and the threat landscape and try again to make that connection so that those target buyers understand this person understands my world. And also, they're helping me understand better the dynamics of what I'm facing. Haven't even talked about their product, but I think this is someone I want to explore. Like, I want now to understand how do you help me with that, right? So you need to understand where your target audience and your buyers are and try to go to them. So the website, you're going to have obviously, account-based marketing is pretty much key today. It's critical. It's the only way. You know, CISOs today, whether it's CISOs, CIOs today are big because now a lot of CIOs now are kind of owning the cyber side. You're seeing kind of a consolidation of CISOs sometimes reporting up to CIOs. So now you're trying to communicate to CIOs. It's different to talk to them than a CISO. But look, these are people that have zero time to talk to you, right? So the challenge of how do you get to them, right? So very targeted, smart account-based marketing. You're going to use social networking to try to, reach them. You're going to try to use influencers and community side. So how do you get to the influencers that they respect so that those influencers can maybe talk about what you do and maybe even talk about your product? That's critical. Obviously, I build podcasts. I've had built two award-winning podcasts and one with Phosphorus called the IoT Security Podcast. I use that, which then goes to YouTube. And so you're using YouTube, all of those channels. And so when you have a limited budget, you need to be very precise on what are you doing? How are you going to put dollars toward those while at the same time, being at the places you kind of have to go to? You kind of have to have some presence at Black Hat and RSA and some of the big shows. I'm not a big advocate of actually exhibiting at those shows when you're so early. Again, how do you even do that? I'd rather use guerrilla tactics to go and try to find ways to connect, but you need to be there, and that takes money, right? Does that make sense? So you're putting money to your infrastructure and your ops inside BDR, SDR teams. I build them. Those are critical. Dollars have to go there. That's a really, really critical function today to try to again leverage to, pick up and move from those account-based marketing and those campaigns to go try to make connections, use social, right? Also convert leads from the funnel to stages. So those are the kinds of things you want to smartly put your money and resources on. Given the fact, as you said, you have
Hmm.
very limited budgets and you don't have the ability to just go splurge. So you
Yep.
always want to make sure you're also reviewing what's working, what's not. And if something isn't working, done, like be done quick and move on to something else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You touch on the in-person events there. When do you reckon a company should splash out and get a big stand at an RSA or a Black Hat? I was over at Black Hat Vegas a couple of months ago. Obviously, see the Sentinel Ones, the CrowdStrikes, the Whizzes of the world who spend thousands and thousands of dollars on these massive, massive stands. Whether they see a good ROI on those or not, I'm not sure. When do you think a company would actually benefit from doing that, and do they actually see a positive ROI from it?
Yeah, I mean, that's another $60,000 question. I mean, a lot of times it comes down to, what the marketing leaders in the company kind of wants to do. I just personally have done that for so long. I'm kind of somewhat allergic to the trade shows. I think they've just become vendor shows in many cases. Fewer and fewer. Again, as I said, you go to those shows because you want your buyer and your ICP to be there, right? The problem is over time, those shows have become where they're not really there in a lot of the time. I think Black Hat's a little better. RSA just become a little bit too of a big of a vendor show. Um, so I'm just not early on. I just think your money's better spent trying to figure out how can I go to the show? How can I maybe partner with someone who is a bigger brand so I can ride on their shoulders a little bit at the show, maybe be in their booth, maybe do something with them. Obviously, there's lots of events and parties. You can go be part of those, right? Um, I'm a fan of having a presence there. So, you can have a nice suite, you can set up your product there, you can use your BDR team and some of your, kind of focused ABM type marketing to try to get to some of those buyers who are there and say, please stop by and we'd love to show you this product and show you our value, right? So I'm maybe more of a fan of spending the money on things like that. Once you get to a point, however, where you're starting to grow and you need now your brand to be more aware, right? You need more awareness around your brand. That can be the time now where maybe after a couple, 3 years of doing more guerrilla tactics to those shows, you're now going to go invest more, right? Um, and that could be on the show floor. That could be also outside the show floor, right? There's now all kinds of ways you can connect with users outside the show floor. So there's, with different kiosks maybe or other type of advertising. But you're going to do that. But I'm a fan of it more a little bit later. Once you're starting to get some traction, clearly have product market fit, all that's good. You're tracking, you're driving, but now you need to really step it up. And it's time now to argue, in many cases, to your CEO or your board. We need to spend more money this year on these big shows. It's time to go do that. Does that make sense? So sometimes a little bit later. Because as you said, you go into those show floors and the big guys just, the amount of money they spend is just baffling, right? So it's
Mhm.
very difficult to go try to, as I said, communicate your value, make a connection, right? Be passionate on those show floors with all that noise. But sometimes you
Yeah.
just have to, yeah.
hmm What are the biggest challenges you face when trying to market a complex solution to maybe a broader audience? What are some of the challenges that you may have come up against there?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of the time sometimes it's even developing the category, right? So a lot of areas of security that I've been in have been on the very front end of that category. So a lot of what you're doing, you're not only trying to educate and, create some mind share and awareness around your brand, but you're actually trying to define the market, define that category in that space. And many times that is as difficult as it is to try to communicate to someone what your value is and why you're even on this earth, providing something to them that they might want. And so that can be some of the biggest challenges, right? Just like, because with that, my, you know, approach there is that you need to define that market. You need to name it, you need to define it. And I kind of think of it as you need to be the one that plants a firm flag in that ground of that category in that space that says we will define this and we will lead it and others will follow us, right? You kind of have to have that mentality, but you need to build that category sometimes. And that means with the analysts, right? You're trying to kind of drive the analysts too to kind of talk about that and maybe publish research around it, or maybe even create a magic quadrant for that category, which is the ultimate what you want to do. So those sometimes can be some of the biggest challenges you face is that you're building out the category. So you're educating people on, hey, this is a problem. You have a lot of things you're trying to do. You may not be thinking about this problem in this area, right? And right now I've been doing that on the IoT OT side, right? It's a big one that's kind of bubbling down there, but you need to bring that up to the surface, right? And now there's going to be a magic quadrant on that, right? So those of us that are building categories, we have a lot to do with driving that to happen, right? So that's certainly a challenge when you need to build a category. Sometimes achieving product market fit can be a challenge. If you don't exactly have product market fit, you need to go do that. And that's experimental, right? It
hmm
might be dependent on a certain vertical you think is the one you need to be in. Then you discover, no, that's not the vertical at all. It could be a certain approach or technology that your product is focused on, and then you get there and find out, no, that's not actually the problem. We need to have the technology do this instead, right? So you're trying to get your product market fit. So when you're kind of building a category, trying to build product market fit, grow the brand, drive, demand, fill the funnel, those are challenging times, right? Um, but again, that's what kind of is the fun part of it. It's
Hmm.
tough, challenging, but it's fun. Um,
It
and
wouldn't be
especially
rewarding if it was easy.
no, it wouldn't be right. And so, that's why, the startup, those that do startups and kind of go and acquire the skills to be, in this hot seat that we call the chief marketing officer or full stack CMO. It is a hot seat, can be very volatile. It's a select group, I'd say, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been really fun chatting anyway this morning, John. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Talk soon,
Take
Nathan.
care.
I'll